my mother. Hold on a second.
Yeah, put her on speaker.
Music for our mother.
Are you at the house? Okay, goodbye. Love you. Bye. She's at your house. Okay,
That's
all right. One more minute.
Am I gonna? I got her. How are you?
I'm well.
I'm literally in this. I was like, here are the children. They're going up to me, sorry. You know the staff member. Anybody want to work with J-Town? Well, danger staff.
I'm not volunteering for anything. My rule is you sit on your hands.
I'm not.
You're asking for help.
People start looking at you like that, darling.
I'm starting to say no.
Free food, that's good.
Yeah. All right, being 6 o'clock, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. First on the list is approved minutes from 8/16/22. Motion. Any corrections or updates? No? All right.
I had a couple of things that were just, the technology facilitator is not filling in for the library media specialist, as it says on the second page, B1.
Okay.
So she's consulting.
Okay. Melissa didn't do the minutes the last.
Right, I know that.
So she
She
didn't.
just didn't want it to read as if we thought our tech facilitator was filling in for
Right.
library media
No,
specialist.
yes,
That's not
thank you.
done.
Another? Any
Yes,
more?
the pickup, the drop-off is here in front of the Whitney Center, and it indicated that they were coming through the front loop, but we changed that.
Correct, yeah, so, yeah, and then, yeah. You getting all that one?
Drop off is in front of the Whitney Center, and then what got changed?
Drop-off will be in front of the Whitney Center, and it said for safety concerns, children will not be allowed on the playground during the school, or after the school day, and that wasn't accurate.
That's not,
No.
No, they just requested that
they requested to have an adult there with, the adults with them. Yeah. So they could be alone on the playground. More?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ready to approve the minutes with the changes noted? Those in favor? Thank you. Citizen comments? All right. Presentation of school programs, FYI items.
I think we have the hot trip recap,
Nice.
which you didn't get a chance to do at the end of last year.
Oh,
So
right.
I'm getting back to talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah, and I'm happy to, and I brought some slide pictures as well, so I don't know if you want to turn around or if you want to have a seat in the audience, but.
Do it.
Roll through this real quick. So, John Marshall and Victoria Hill and I wanted to just give a recap to the board, and they have more than enough things going on. So I volunteered just to show up and just talk a little bit about the 5-6 kind of big end of the year trip last year, which was up to Carter Not Shut. And so, I don't know if you can see that. It was a trip that was funded by a grant through the River Network. So I'm not sure if people remember or not, but we didn't, students did not pay anything for that trip. It was a $6,000 grant in total, and so we worked with various grade levels throughout the year, and kind of the culminating experience was this trip. And that's one of the Carter Lakes right there, Wildcat in the background. So what I thought I'd do is just do a brief recap, kind of let you know what we did, how we, how it went, and hopefully encourage us to do something very similar again. So we started off and we drove up to the Appalachian Mountain Club in Pinkham Notch, and did a full gear shakedown and repackage up there. And it was really nice to have the AMC as a partner because that took care of transportation logistics, food logistics, gear that completely outfitted us, and it made it really easy. This was a trip that we could have run as a school without that partner, but having the AMC as a partner, and Ted Mountain, right, as well, as a partner was very, very helpful. And so this is where we started the trip up there, Big Notch, getting everything ready. And then we shuttled over to the trailhead, and we took the 19-mile trailhead off of Route 16 up there, which is 3.8 miles and 2,000 feet of elevation gain. And if you look at the size of some of those packs going up, so you're talking about 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and 11-year-olds that are carrying more weight than they ever have in their entire life, and probably for some of them doing I would say one of the hardest things that they've probably physically done. And they did really great, kind of navigating terrain and getting up there. And we did also like really take our time. So we took lots of breaks as well and made sure it wasn't like a forced march and just to enjoy it. While we were up there, the academic focus was on watersheds and water quality. And so you can see in the left-hand picture, there's Cole and Everett, Ivana and Sam, other people, and they're using natural materials to mimic stream flow and just getting an idea of where water moves and how it might travel. And they generally have a watershed. And so they've got mountains up at the top of their watershed, less mountains down in the valley below, and just kind of looking at where that actually goes. On the right, they're supplementing that with looking at topographic maps and just trying to figure out exactly the essence of place. We did a lot of water quality testing as well. So there's Greg looking at maybe dragonfly, I'm not quite sure what he's looking at there. Some macroinvertebrate, and Aubrey going through data collection. So there was various protocol points that they needed to collect and then assess whether or not the water was healthy up there, which is something that the standards that we use to do this are the same that are done by New Hampshire DES, so it's in line with that as well as the Forest Service. So it gave them a real sense of community science and also the kind of science that actual professional scientists use. And so it's kind of fun when you can take a 5th grader and let them know this is the exact same thing that a career professional uses to assess water quality. The water quality at the Carter Lakes is excellent, by the way, in case you're curious. It's excellent. It's very helpful that it's the headwaters and surrounded by national forest. We also did journaling in the evening. So this is a picture. I don't know if you can't quite see it. That's Ivana sitting right there, but just absolutely spectacular and beautiful. And the kind of experience that doesn't happen on a day trip. This only happens in a residential experience where you're staying the night, right? And so we did some evening journaling each night, as well as skits. Some of the skits incorporated teaching points and also just to have fun, right? Just to have fun and enjoy ourselves being up there. So living there, we were there for 3 days, right? So life up in Carter Notch. And really, the academic portion is very important and the impetus for going, but these kind of communal aspect is what makes residential experiences so special and so important. So I actually, I was going to say students were responsible for, and I took out that for, and just responsible period. They were just so great. They took on so much responsibility. We had meal crews, dish crews, cleanup crews. So there's Aubrey and Sativa making brownies for dessert one of the nights. There's toasting bagels in the morning. The students were charged with they had to plan and make the meal for 12 people, a crew of 3 kids. And these are, 5th and 6th graders that a lot of them probably have never cooked, my kid included, had never cooked a meal in their life. And so having to navigate that and figure that out is a great skill to start with. They had to set tables, clean up, and then run meals. So they had to make sure, trying to eliminate the amount of food waste that we created, because we had to pack everything back down. So trying to manage that, as well as one of my favorite, maybe their less favorite, was dishes. Lots and lots of dishes, right? So there's not a dishwasher up there. At the time, we were very lucky because the water had been turned on. When the water's not on, you have to get it from the lakes, but it was on, so that made dishes a little bit easier. But using a bucket system going through and showing them that process. So there's Mr. Marshall and Everett and all the washing some dishes. And then also just practicing leadership skills. So one of the things that we tried to include was to have morning meetings and afternoon meetings that were, run, so kind of mimicking all school assemblies, all school meeting. So where the students would have to kind of run and let other students know, okay, here's the plan today, here's what we're going, here's what we're doing. And it really allowed some students that maybe don't always step up to take that leadership role an opportunity to do so in a very small setting, which is sometimes nice. And then they had to, we were in bunkhouses while we lived up there, while we were there staying there those 3 days. And they were charged with, they had to sweep them out every morning, clean them out before they went to bed, and just in general taking care of those things as well. We were very fortunate in that the grant, we specifically went after a grant big enough that we could get the entire hut. That's not usually the case, and we were very fortunate for that. It provided for a very intense and I think a very special experience to have it just be us there. I mean, normally we only brought 12 people, so normally there'd be 24 other guests there. So normally they would be sharing the space with a lot of other people. Just to have Carter Notch, the entire notch itself to ourselves was pretty amazing. And then we had downtime, and that was we tried to build in quite a bit of downtime. And so we did things like hang out at night around the Carter Ponds, played a lot of games, and then we just explored. We spent a lot of time, there's an awesome rock pile behind that called the Ramparts, and so we spent a lot of time just exploring that area. And actually from that's Paul and Everett, and like from that position right there, you have a direct line of sight down to Jackson, which is pretty neat. There's more pictures of us exploring and hanging out. So, on this trip, right, we went over and under logs, through the snow. They were excited about that in late May. There was still quite a bit of snow up there. We did have a snowball fight at one point, around 3,000 feet, which was very exciting. We had to ford streams. That was a real thing we did. We did quite a bit of rock hopping on the first couple river crossings coming down, and then after a while, the students just decided we were going to go through it. So we did a full assessment. So that was something that was kind of fun to talk about with them. We talked about how you assess whether or not the water is safe to cross, and went through a couple of different assessment techniques. And once they determined it was, they're free to walk across. This is like my favorite picture in the entire. I took like 1,000 pictures, and that picture of Gregory is just fantastic. Like that is just a kid with so much joy at that moment, standing in a river. It was so great. It was so great. And more than anything, we just had fun. Like we just had a fun trip together as a 5-6 class. And whether that was playing around, doing skits, or just or doing the water quality up there, it just seemed like it was a very enjoyable experience. And the thing that was so great about it is that it's our backyard. I mean, that's literally our backyard. So on the last day, we walked out from Carter Notch, and we started walking, and some of the students were like, well, wait, this isn't the way we came in. And we said, well, remember we talked, we're gonna walk back to Jackson, and it didn't really hit home, because they got dropped off. I mean, if you're in 5th or 6th grade, if you're 10 years old, and you get dropped off on Route 16 at the 19-mile trail, you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you've been dropped off in the middle of nowhere. You hike up a mountain, and then now you have to walk home. And so we did. It's amazing. So, we walked the Wildcat River Trail the whole way back. We followed the river, which was the course of our study, as we made it down. So it was really a fantastic trip, and I can't impress enough how formative it was. I think I just got to see so many different sides of students I hadn't seen before. And I think a lot of the other students express that. Like I know personally, my daughter would come back and she said something like, "Wow, I've never seen that particular student so open or so silly in how they act." And so I really just close with these residential experiences are super important. I know that Mr. Marshall and Ms. Hill are evaluating where to go this spring with their group, and it doesn't matter to me if that's back to a HUD or the ecology school or somewhere, but I would just really put a strong plug in for these residential experiences. It's a tremendous growth opportunity academically, but also just emotionally and socially for students. So, Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, the one thing I'll add, sorry, I left that place from the Whitney Center. The one thing that was maybe the coolest thing is when we got down that afternoon, I ran into 3 different parents. Kids that had second graders, kids that had kindergartners, kids that had fourth graders, and they said, we cannot wait until our kids are old enough to go on this trip. So, it was just a great feeling.
Awesome. I completely agree. It's amazing experiences for these kids. So thank you very much for doing it, facilitating it, and getting it together. So thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
know it's not easy work. Awesome. All right, old business. Something to say there?
Yeah.
All right, instructional issues. All right, consider personal actions considering establishing a one-to-one special aid position. Thank you, Gary. You have that in here, right?
It is.
All right.
Somebody should make a motion.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Okay. Are we good? Anything you want to talk about? Or does everybody understand?
Yes, I do, I understand.
All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Just an FYI, item, transfer of Kathy Burns. And that approved stipend for Megan Murphy for library media special services.
Motion for that?
Second. All those in favor? Okay, consider establishing an ESOL teacher, 25% position.
I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second. All those in favor? All right. Election of Hampton's Senate for soccer coordinator. Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Awesome. All right, business affairs, FYI 22 budget status report.
Yeah, that's, we'll go over that, sorry. That's your new budget for this year, and you can see you're in good shape as of right now.
21-22 summary of expenses and receipts.
Yeah, so if, in your board packet is, basically this is your end of the year books that you go through, and it's broken up into 2 things. One is you have your adopted budget, how much of that budget did you expend throughout the year? And there's a summary of those pieces, and you can see you went over in a couple areas and under in a few. So your expended budget, you didn't expend $112,942. So that is, that includes everything. Some library media specialist pieces that weren't filled last year. You'll see some health insurance pieces that came back. And that's your expenditures. And then you'll see the revenue on the next page. And this is what, you know, we anticipate when we build the budget, how much revenue that you would receive. And you can see there are a couple of things that did come up. And 2 of those were the Whitney Center and then reimbursement of your health insurance. Okay, so the health insurance, because there are 3 that are overseen by the state, and they can't keep X number of dollars. It's supposed to be non-profit end of things, so you got a reimbursement for that. So you have $26,000 worth of revenue there. So that leads you to consider the retaining fund balance. And I'll just go through that and we can talk about it. So you have a total of $174,086. And because back in March of 2018, you can keep 2.5% of that, your net assessment, which is $69,908. You could keep some of it, you could keep all of it, you could return everything. Typically what you've done is you've kept about $50,000, but that's where you're at. So somebody would have to make
Make a motion?
Any questions? I'm trying to figure out how much.
Jerry, what's this in that?
Do you want to just keep? I don't foresee it.
Well, that's kind of, money's fungible, but I think, so we specifically retained, I think, 25 and put extra into the, special ed fund, which,
Or you mean drawing more from the special ed fund right now with what some of the new, I mean, what preceded this piece of the puzzle, right? Was it seems like we were using some more resources, so do we want to retain more so that we can make sure we're not,
so the special ed piece is simply was our, we had the capital reserve fund for it.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't high enough from what we planned to be exposed to.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to grow it more without impacting the tax rate as much. So we had retained simply $25,000 last year.
Yeah.
To offset adding that to it. So the way that we do that is by actually giving back 25 this year from that retained balance.
Yeah.
So if we retain another $50,000 this year, then it's up to you to actually do that. I guess is kind of what the point is. Unless we actually want to, do that again for next year, because we didn't spend $174,000 total. So there's 114 going back anyway if we retain 50, or 124 going back if we retain 50. And if we can consider that 25 coming from that balance going back, and and setting that, so yes, shall game. I'll make the motion that we retain $50,000. And
Second?
kind of the idea is that, if we have a fund balance next year, we should probably keep growing that, special ed fund. Because we were, I don't know what is that, but,
200.
Yeah.
We are at, we were at 197, and we put in 25.
25, so 225.
we were kind of hoping to bring it up to about 250, which, I think Pam at the last March meeting said that might not even really be enough for what we might be exposed to, but it might be the fairest kind of balance that we can come up with for now. So certainly we do that again next year, we'll put 25 back into that. And I guess, the shelving we're playing here, let's assume that we have no fund balance, that we spent all of our money from this year's budget, and we come to this point again next year, that's when we would actually reduce that fund balance that we retain down $25,000, because we actually do have money left over the budget.
Yeah.
Then we can shift the money that way to cover kind of in principle why we're retaining the money in the first place there. Because theoretically, it's to have for emergency expenditures, but it's kind of tough to see what kind of emergency expenditures we might incur that we need that, because we do have capital reserve funds to handle our emergency expenditures, like whether a boiler breaks down or we have a student moves in that we have to tuition to the high school or things like that. We have capital reserves for that, which exceed what we can retain in the fund balance. So that's why that shell game kind of works in my mind anyway, philosophically.
I second that.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of retaining 2,000 for the capital reserve fund? Yeah.
The retaining fund.
Retaining fund balance.
Thank you. So we don't do that now, signing of the MS.
I have before you leave
That
tonight,
paper has to be signed,
these
this one.
need to be
Oh,
signed.
those two. This one's school financial report, the one,
Yeah.
that one too?
Well, we couldn't sign those until we did what we just did.
No, I know, when he does, it can,
Just 8D, that's,
yeah.
Got it. Okay. Approved food service contract with Bartlett.
so, if I may.
Yep.
Remember the food prices were adjusted, so this is just a revision
Yep.
of the agreement with Bartlett.
Make a motion. We need a motion for that.
Yes. Second. All those in favor? Thank you. We're back to you, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, just a couple of things, district-wide, I think we're off to a really good start all the way around. I know that buildings are opening up, and getting people back into the buildings is a good thing. People enjoy that. I know the high school just had their homecoming weekend, great weather, good to get kind of the school spirit back in the start of things. We have a few things going on, the principal search. We will be meeting with the personnel committee later on, what is it, next week?
26.
Yeah, the 25th. And reviewing the job description with Gail and kind of the roles and responsibilities. And then we'll need to set up time to get some feedback from the school board. And then we'll reach out to the community as well. But that will be the succession in the end of this month and the beginning of October. And then it'll be time to really start getting ready and appointing a committee later on and beginning the advertising process. So that's the principal search committee. We also have the SAU 9-13 joint board meeting Thursday night this week. We'll talk a little bit more about the tuition study committee and joint management, but that's it. And then I didn't know if you had any budget direction for Gail or I, because next month we start the process of looking at 22, 23. No, 23, 24. Holy moly. Yeah. So I don't know, I mean, we kind of go through the needs-based budget and go through, but if there's anything specific you wanted us to incorporate into the process. You don't have to do that.
I think the biggest thing is that if we were kind of directed to decrease the budget by any sort of amount, I say for myself anyway, that's not something that I would want to recommend.
Agree, just looking at head count, what we have, what we wanted, what we proposed, I mean, I would like to try and figure out again how to get the media specialist, you know, the positions that we really are suffering with. So I know I can work with creativity coming back to see how we can fill those positions, because they are ongoing and we're borderline what we're band-aiding at this point. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with that, to look at like what it takes to run the school, where it needs to be at. Priority.
Okay. That's all I have for direction.
That's it for me.
All right, so opening has gone very smoothly. We started with an ice cream social, which was very well attended, a great time. We got a lot of positive feedback about how wonderful it was to be able to have the kids not only come back and see their classmates and their teachers, but we invited families in to see their classrooms for the first time in a couple of years. So some of the parents, even though their student was in second or third grade, hadn't been in the building. So it was a nice chance to have that opening up the buildings again. We also offered curriculum night, which we hadn't done in 3 years, which is where the teachers discuss with families their goals and the curriculum areas and a little bit about their behavior, expectations and classroom management, so that parents can have kind of an overview of what the year is going to look like. So again, that was very well attended, and our PTO organized childcare. So that enabled a lot of families to come that might not have been able to come. So I don't see any of them here, but there's a husband of a PTO member that, just to thank them for pulling that together, because that made a huge difference in enabling families to come to that kind of thing. And they're right now working on trying to look at childcare for the early release days, knowing that we don't have an organized after-school program like we had hoped for this year, but they're trying to offer some opportunities for families to take advantage of some childcare and activities on our early release days. The next PTO meeting, we are going to have Lauren is going to meet with the PTO about the music program here in Jackson. We have a very large 4th grade class, and we're hoping that everyone takes up an instrument, and we've also changed the format of chorus a little bit to have everyone must attend unless their parents sign them out. It used to be the other way around, that the parents we would sign them up. Now we have her having them all participate unless they get signed out. So participation is high so far. That's very good. I like that. Yeah. So in all, we're off to a really good start. Oh,
soccer. So-
right. I wasn't sure we were going to be able to run soccer this year, but we've done some heavy recruiting and had some really great parents volunteer to step up and take responsibility for putting that together. And parent coaches that were kind of training, on-the-job training really quick. So we do have a soccer program. It's a little different than the one that some of you might remember, but all of the kids are playing soccer on Tuesday and Thursday only, rather than spreading it over the week and dividing it up by age group. And we put the 4, 5, 6 together because we didn't have enough students to play as just a 5, 6 team. So there's been a little bit of a change in the program, but it's still enabling those who would like to play to get out and be part of a soccer program. And we've started lining up some games with some of the other communities as well. So the first one, unfortunately, was canceled today because of the rain. But hopefully we'll reschedule that and have some opportunity to have the kids compete with kids from other communities.
That's awesome.
Kids like soccer.
Anything else?
No,
Thank you so much. I'm glad things are going so well. I left the ice cream social.
I know, but you even that children came and had ice cream.
I've been hearing a lot from a lot of families just how excited everybody is to be back in community. So it's really well done, I would say, to the PTO and to Gail and all the staff. It really comes through with what the feel is at the school right now.
Good, thank you.
Policy committee, that's me. We met today, just so you know, we're going over some things, organizing things as usual, but we're pretty much on target with what we need. Katie Wilson does an amazing job helping us bring our policies up to date. So there'll be some at the next meeting for us to move to second reading. Personnel committee?
We're meeting next week.
Okay.
Get that going.
All right. Facility and Transportation Committee?
Nothing formal for that. Probably will at the next meeting, so.
High School Options Committee?
So the High School Options Committee met this afternoon, and our focus at this point in time is doing some research on 4 high schools, and there's Kennett, Freiburg, we're going to look at Robert Frost, and we're going to look at Gorham, and we have a matrix so that we're all using the same information and filling the matrix in. And we've set some deadlines for ourselves to get that matrix completed. The committee includes James Glazer's on the committee, and we had Peter Benson joined us as a guest from the community today. And Erica's a member of the committee, myself, Jessica Della Valle. Jessica is a whiz at all the paperwork, and I'm appreciative of that. And then Kevin sits with us as guidance, and Jen Anzaldi stopped and visited with us today and shared information. So, you know, we're up and running and have lots of information, and every month I'll be sharing the news from the committee with you. And certainly in the middle of the month, you can reach out with any other questions that you have.
Thank you. Enrichment Committee?
Oh, I don't think we really.
No.
I think that was a quick committee, right? So that can probably be taken off. I mean, we're all for having an after-school program, but we can find personnel who can do it. We have a system in place. We know how to pay for it. We need someone. So if anyone knows someone, great. We're ready to have you.
DEI?
Yeah, DEI committee. So we are in the middle of a 2-pronged meeting. So we're kind of midway through about really looking at the board priorities of looking at what we want JGS students to know about diversity, equity, and inclusion when they leave JGS, and we're having a really good in-person brainstorming about that. It's been going great. It's been awesome to be back in person, and we have a second one in early October.
Great.
Pam's joined us, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. That's our report. Awesome. Safety Committee?
So the Safety Committee, we've met 3 times during the summer to fill in 156, I think it is, page document, Susan can attest. And then Chief Curley met with the faculty this past week, and I joined, and he talked about things that he had seen as needs for the school, and praised them on a lot of the positive things he was seeing around the building. And then he announced there will be a training. It's called ALICE. It's a formalized training to do with more like the active shooter response, and that's coming up October 7th. And the staff will be apprised of that. What did surprise me, they weren't too many questions. They were very thoughtful, and you know, the staff seemed to be taking it all in. There was a lot of information. So some very positive things. It was good to hear about how safe this community, you know, they're looking out for each other, and you know, the fire department in the month of October will be coming in. October is fire awareness.
Fire safety month.
Everywhere. And so there'll be some extra fire drills in that month. So a lot good on the safety committee.
We're thinking in October to try an actual response from the fire department where he brings all his volunteers in. They pull up one of the stations for the drill, and the firemen come in, and men and women come in and search the school to try to find out which of the smoke alarms was triggered. We get to time the dispatch time to see how long it takes. Get to look at the traffic when the actual fire trucks come through the driveway, and how that works with kids leaving and staff being around. So it's like a full-fledged, as real as we can be without really having a fire. So
That's a great idea. Anytime we can get the kids exposure to the people that are gonna help them in their uniform, because that's scary for kids.
they always
really-
come and do the all-school
they do that,
meeting
yeah.
and turn
They're
on the
great.
buzzers and the air tags.
Yeah, our fire department's wonderful with those guys. It's just getting that repetition. Whitney Center?
So the Whitney Center has kind of divided up the way it has been running. So there's now a person that's taking over for programming, that's kind of affiliated with the Friends of the Whitney Center. And it's a new person that was hired to be the facilities person, the manager of the facilities, that's gonna work with Susan on scheduling and, you know, making sure things are going smoothly with that. Her name is Bridget Early. And so I've noticed on Facebook the postings of some of the activities. The idea is just to get out to the community that they're sponsoring events here. So there will be a programming section, and then Gail and I will probably be more on to the sort of the management piece of it. Oversight committee. So we're kind of divided into two groups, because we were coming to this meeting of, 8 to 10 people, and there were kind of two camps that were settling out. So now there will be a definite divide between them two, and there'll be communication amongst them. But that'll be going forward. But everything's still going to go through Susan as far as scheduling use of the Whitney Center. But it's good. We had one group over there this afternoon and a group in here at 4. It was in 4, so Whitney Center's getting utilized. So.
Perfect. And I have one committee that I chair as well, co-chair, is the Jackson Needs Committee. So for those that don't know, I've been updating everybody once a month, but next Tuesday, the 27th, is a meeting here in town, and it really is to gather and educate the community at large as to what facilities we have, what buildings we have, what land we may have, but more importantly, what services will we need in the future, what services do people want in the future. So next Tuesday, we're having North Country Council come in and do a good 25-minute presentation as to what towns like ours might need in the future, so 10, 20 years from now, what we're looking at. And then we're going to do a little education on what buildings does the town actually own, what facilities do we have. And then we're going to do a survey, which will go out in November to all the taxpayers to see what would you like in your community. Is it Meals on Wheels? Is it electric car hubs? Whatever it is, but So put your thinking cap on. So it's a great meeting to come to kind of work together as far as what are we looking for in the community. And this committee is tasked with going back to the selectmen in the town for this coming cycle. So we have to report back by March, February timeframe back to the selectmen and see where it goes from there. But it's exciting, it's open-minded, there's no money, there'll be dessert and childcare, so if you could come next Tuesday at 7 and bring a friend that pays taxes in town, that would be great. That's not always.
Very specific, friend.
Very specific friend. Could be your mate, that's okay, or whatever. Okay, date for next meeting, October 17th, 6 p.m. Before that, we have a joint board meeting. I would like to recommend that possibly the school board we stay after that meeting so that we can possibly talk about what we would like for the principal.
So that'd be like a 5 to 8 o'clock commitment.
Options committee meeting at 4.
Darlene just,
Oh, Kevin's going to
okay,
be.
bring your cupcakes
And
back.
James and-
So we can have it another day, I just figured we
We're
would do it
going to
together.
start at 4 only because we can't start at 4:30 if we have to be done for 5, so.
Right.
And we're going to meet before the school board meetings to have a consistent meeting date.
Right.
It's too hard to get.
All right, so do you want to pick a different date? We should pick a different date.
Why don't we put it on the regular agenda and we think between now and then, just what we might want to bring
Okay,
to that so that we can have that discussion as a board.
okay,
Whether we do, where we do it doesn't really matter.
right,
Even if it's after everything else we do, it would still be part of a public meeting, so,
right,
where we're gonna plug it
This
into
is a
the
public
agenda.
meeting, okay.
right.
But
Yeah.
rather, so we don't spend a whole lot of time at that meeting on that subject, we think about between now and then what we each wanna see kind of in that, and then we can do the discussion on the ball right now.
All right.
Good solution.
Okay. Okay, so consider establishing a KHS tuition study committee. Kevin, do you want to just give a little
Yeah.
pretext?
Sorry, just got
Yeah.
So, so we all went through this process, meaning the valley went through a process of putting an agenda, an article on the warrant to establish a cooperative school district study committee. And that's guided by RSA. And you exhausted that whole process. Darlene sat on that, Jerry and Jen, actually, 3 went through that. And during that process, there was, kind of ruling out the cooperative, but also taking a look at what's called joint management agreement and tuition contracts. So the question at that time was, do we want to move forward with the cooperative? And the decision was made no. There was interest in getting back together, and there was another session that was took place in the summer, but it wasn't a sanctioned group. So moving forward, people are going to have to do something in terms of figuring out what they're going to do for educating high school students. So establishing a formalized committee then delegates some authority to these folks to speak on behalf of Jackson at a meeting in a more formalized manner, other than just, we could sit around and drink coffee all day long with a group of people. So it makes sense to have a seat at the table, if you will, with a committee to move forward in conjunction with what already is going on with your other subcommittees. So my recommendation would be to establish a committee to further study Kent High School.
I think I was kind of got a little bit kind of muddled up with that, is that
Yeah.
for me, I envisioned that being specifically geared towards discussions with Conway about what tuition would look like with Conway. And rather than Conway doing that with each individual town separately, it would be a forum in which all 8 towns would get together and discuss what the tuition would look like for Conway. And that kind of information is something that our community is already looking into our options to then use as data points for it. And it seems like it's a little bit bubbled up now. But I think that what we can do, what I'd like to see for us to do is just, if there is going to be a tuition committee for the 8 towns to get together to discuss, like we're discussing the cooperative, like we're discussing the JMA, if we're going to have a forum for that, let's appoint a couple board members that would sit in on that committee with Conway, if it ever actually happens. And if it doesn't happen, because again, like it's gotten conflated with what other towns are doing for options as well. And it's kind of, time is coming up quick. I mean, these decisions need to be made by 2024. But there's a couple of questions I think that we need to have answered for ourselves that this committee can do when it comes specifically to Conway. One of which is, if we don't opt out of the current contract, what happens? I don't know. I don't know if you actually know. If technically we do have to say that we're going to withdraw from the contract if there's going to be a new contract with Conway. So the way I read the contract is that if we don't do that, then it would just be based on the current formula with some details missing out. So I don't even know if it's technically possible. So I mean, one of the first things that we have to ask as 8 towns that share the high school with Conway is, what happens if we don't opt out of the contract, and specifically, and then if we do need to opt out of the contract and have a new contract, shouldn't we just be looking to do that? And that might be an easy thing for us to answer and just to technically go through the motions to do. But at the same time, we don't want that to be a signal to Congress saying, we don't want to go to high school here anymore, because we still want that to be a viable option. And that's what I mean by, it's gotten kind of muddled up, and I don't think all of the boards fully understand what the process is going to look like yet. Because again, it's getting conflated with the idea that Bartlett might be negotiating for some kind of different contract with Conway, or Tamworth might be negotiating for some kind of different contract with Conway. So those kind of questions are going to need to be answered, and that's why, to me, it would be smart for the 8 towns to get together in a wide format so that we could have those conversations intelligently, so that we all know, we all are expressing the same kind of language, have the same kind of understanding of what it's going to look like. And so for me, I'd like to form that committee and come up with a couple of immediate goals for it, which is first to figure out what happens if we don't withdraw from the contract. And the other thing I'd like to see is the biggest bit of the information that I see, the one piece is where the negotiation is going to happen, and the biggest questions arise is, how are we going to, like, for instance, with, like, we pay for rent to Bartlett for use of the property. And Conway is certainly going to want to have capital expenses shared with the towns that send their kids to Conway school. Does Conway currently have a plan for capital outlay for the high school specifically? And if they don't, it would be nice as a town that might be wanting to enter into a contract with them for Conway to actually have a plan that we want to put X amount of dollars into a capital outlay program over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So that we know that, hey, if Jackson's contributing $100,000 a year to a capital improvement plan for the high school, is there one? And what does it look like? So we can tell our taxpayers, we spend $100,000 a year in rent or in capital improvement to the high school, and here's why we do that and what it looks like. And those are to me, I'd like to have those 2 things answered sometime relatively soon, in which case one of the things you can do is ask Conway about that. Meaning, like, do you have a capital outlay plan for the high school? And if you don't, are you going to get one?
Is this something that can be brought up on Thursday?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's exactly it, because Jerry's, you're right on the mark. If everybody makes the same decision, it's relatively easy, but if it starts splintering off, then it becomes even more complex. So there needs to be a kind of what are we going to do in timelines moving forward. I work for SU, I work for all your boards, but people have to figure those things out.
So I guess I'm saying that we should have 2 people on that committee anyway, just to formalize that. So if there is a forum in which the ascending towns get together, we'll have 2 people that can participate in that. And I'm willing to be on that committee as long as Darlene agrees too, because she needs more time. She doesn't do anything at all right now.
I'm pretty bored. I'm about to raise my hand.
I don't think we need to.
I didn't want to beat anyone else out.
I don't think we need to name both of those people right now too, but I mean, I'm sort of willing to.
Well, we need to consider establishing, so we need a motion to establish.
But does it make sense to kind of establish it with the first thing to figure out is what happens if we don't withdraw from the contract?
Yes.
Because that's something.
Yeah, and I put that as a generic term.
Yes,
of-
all that falls under this.
Yeah.
because the way I read the contract, I think all the towns have to technically say we're withdrawing from the contract in order to have a new contract.
Otherwise it goes silent here, so it's like a 3-year eject clause, right? So if everybody says, we don't have our stuff together, then it remains in. But the trick would be, what if Bartlett says, oh, we're ejecting out, because that would change some pieces moving forward, or 2 towns say, we're out in 3 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so, all those in favor of establishing a Kennett High School Tuition Study Committee? To formally do it, okay, thank you.
Seconded that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Nobody did.
I made the motion.
I'll second the
Mike
motion.
seconded.
Mike did second it.
Thank you. Okay, and you should bring it up Thursday. Or you should-
It's on the
Okay.
I think Kevin's going to get pretty well, otherwise that's.
You know he's awesome.
Probably better.
COVID days?
Yeah, so previously you had COVID sick days that were in place. So that was previously it was 10 days for covering these pieces. The reason that this is on here is the guidelines at current time are still, if you get COVID, you have to be removed from the school for 5 days. Okay, regardless of whether you're sick or not. Those are the guidelines. So what this request is for staff members who test positive. They can't be using it for anybody else in their family or to go for testing. It would be, if I wake up tomorrow and I test positive, I can't come to school even though I'm feeling great. So the staff members don't have any. So it would be looking at 5 days for staff members who specifically test positive.
Does it matter how often they test positive?
They-
Like once
up
in
to
April,
5
once in
days.
June?
Right. And it's,
5 days per
right now,
incident?
it go through, December 31st, because the guidelines can change.
But I think Jen's asking, like, could they test positive
Today?
5 days
Today
in
and in a month
September,
from
and
now
5 days in
again.
November, and 5 days in December?
No, a maximum 5 days.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
But that's just through December, we might be able to, so, I mean, to me, if,
The new guidelines.
right, but like to your question, if they test positive again in October, they have to take another 5 days off, should that come out of their sick time? Because that's what it otherwise does. I mean, if you have to take the time off, either they take personal days or they don't get paid for those days. So what this is establishing is 5 days, and then at least through December, that's all they've got.
Any other towns doing anything?
5 days, they've done that. And then there's sick banks and all those pieces that you guys have established, so.
I mean, we're pretty well covered, I think, but I'm just pointing that out, that it's,
I think if we find that we're in a situation.
Then we can do that.
Because it's already almost October.
That feels comfortable to me.
I'll make a motion to provide 5 COVID sick days
Second.
for people that, as I got my.
Okay, accept resignation for Kate Fournier with regret.
Make that motion?
Second?
Replacement of board member. This is exciting.
You have two potential candidates, Keith Bradley and Dr. Glazer, who have submitted their interest by last Friday, so give it to you folks.
Never had two.
Yeah, we had 2 before.
Yeah, we had 2 tonight.
And this would be until March of this year, till the election time.
Because that's when Kate's term was up.
No, that's,
No,
It's just always the way it works? Yeah.
Elections are always in March.
And then there'll be.
But I didn't know if like they would take over a term. I was just trying to be clear that it was.
No, it's not
Okay.
in terms of you fill out a position for the year.
Got it.
The next election,
Great.
And then that when becomes a position available for the remainder, the balance of her term, which would be 1 year, I think you said earlier.
yeah.
And you're up against it.
Or whatever
Yeah,
sounds like.
and, Johnny. So we just remember that.
So
I'm up again.
I'll make the motion to nominate Keith Bradley for the position.
Okay, I just want to.
But we have 2 people, so I think we should talk about.
Well, we can't talk about them until we actually get the motion.
Oh, so we can make a motion for each of them?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just confused.
To consider.
Let's do it.
And before we do that, I just want to, before we make a motion, I just want to, for the 2 candidates, that we're looking at or that have applied is meetings, once a month per se, as you've seen. And then there's committees that we really do need help on. So take that into account. It's going to be more time than just coming to a meeting and doing things. We are heading into budget season, so that plays a little bit of a role for us as far as who can help with that as well.
I don't think that would be part of the special that we were talking about.
Okay, I'm just saying for the people, okay, like, I want them to know, so in case they want to withdraw, they can withdraw their, you know, their excitement for being part of us, but if they don't want to be part of us, because we don't have the time to be part of us, because it's more than just the meetings, that's all. So, all right, I'll just let that be it.
Well, you've succeeded, Jen. I'm very interested, and I think over the long term, it's definitely going to be part of my plans. But I think for the sake of the community, I don't know if I can free up as much time as the community would need right now. And so I'll make this a part of ongoing discussions with the board members,
That'd be awesome.
and maybe come back in the spring.
That'd be awesome.
But I appreciate Keith's willingness to serve.
All right, so you're going to stay on the high school?
Yeah, I'm going to stay on the high school committee.
Okay, thank you, and if we, all right, thank you, I appreciate that, that would be awesome. So all my love.
But what I want to add, to me, what's more important than necessarily the committee meetings is that we're coming into our busiest time of year, and we're going to have at least two, maybe more pretty big issues that we need to hit the ground running and have a specific process for. And Keith's experience, I think, is going to help us a lot for that. Again, not knowing where he's going to go with things like, in addition to the school, or adding personnel to our staff in order to fill things like media specialist positions and that. It'd be nice to have someone that has the experience of when we're going through that process and having those discussions. Either way he falls on those, it's the best way to be transparent to the community when someone actually just has a lot of experience with that. And particularly for the budget, because Keith was on that before. That's why I think she's supporting him for the position.
Let's hope he wants to do the budget.
I'll swap out the budget.
Keith?
Keith?
And I think most people know me here, but for those who don't, I was on the board for 12 plus years. I think I was on the budget committee every one of those years. I was here when the new principal started. I was here when we started conversations about our high school contract expiring, and we need to start getting ready for that. And I think I can jump right in and be out to the board.
That's mostly because he wasn't available, right?
Right. And you do have the time, right?
Tuesday and Friday mornings are the only times I'm not available.
Okay. That's good. All right. All right, well, we're down to one, so.
Well, I would say thank you both for being part of it. James, I think it'd be great to get you involved, so you're not off the hook yet. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you see the future, and Keith, that would be great to have you jump right in.
So all those in favor?
You have a motion, I don't know if you.
Oh, there's a second.
You have to do it.
There's a second. Somebody needs a second.
I'll second it.
There you go.
All right, all those in favor? Keith Bradley, join the board. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Thank you. James, thank you very much. You're not off the hook. Okay. All right. Confirm approval of a non-resident student for 22-23 school year.
Okay, you had a request, and that was emailed out to you folks,
Make a
of
motion.
somebody who was there, there's room, Gail's approved it.
Yeah, make a motion to approve this non-resident student.
Second? Favor? Just
Great.
cover our cost for 25%, so. Okay, motion to adjourn? You done?
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, citizen comments, you guys want to talk?
Are you skipping right through
I skipped right through that. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I asked this question of poor Peter, and he's not here, to be officially let off the hook. But does anybody know about who's in charge of mowing the soccer field?
I haven't,
Oh.
Miss Susan?
Stokey contacted Gary Allen, who's the town agent. Gary's out sick currently. He said he would talk to his crew or mow it himself when he can come back.
Thank you.
In the meantime, the field has been painted. but now we're in for rain. And then we're gonna mow, and then we'll paint
And
again.
the geese are loving it. There's
Yeah.
almost
And the
38 of
geese.
them today. We were counting the kids.
So whenever you drive by and the geese are there, it's your public duty to pull into that parking lot, honk your horn, wave your arms.
Jessica, awesome.
Go ahead, Jessica, I'm sorry.
No problem. So I was just wondering, I completely missed any conversation about the school start times. I'm wondering if you guys could just share a little bit about your process in working with the Conley School Board in delaying, in changing the school start time at the high school, and how that got shared out with the community, because it was a surprise to me when.
That was a surprise for me too.
It just went back to what it was before.
Yes,
Yeah,
it did,
yeah.
but there was a lot of discussion and changing it to a later time, which is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatricians and benefited our kids. So I'm just wondering what happened.
Well, there's been,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, there's been quite a few studies. The geography of this place
Yeah.
is extremely difficult to make any movements anyway. So what happened during COVID was it compressed the schedule
Yeah.
to the point where the students had a shorter day and teachers were teaching all day long. And that was for allowing for smaller class sizes. So that was not sustainable the way that it was. So if you were to move the start time of the high school or the middle school, that would mean the elementary school students would have to start really early, or you'd have to buy a whole lot more buses and hire bus drivers.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. I don't think anybody disagrees with it. It'd be great to start, the high school students at 8 o'clock, but.
So was it just a COVID thing that they started later?
Yep, yes, because, that's right, that's what it was. But the day, the high school student day
Yeah.
was much shorter.
Right. Yes, I know that, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and there were some opportunities that weren't allowed because of that schedule as well. So they needed to go back to the previous schedule.
So this is allowing teachers to have more teaching time. Is that-
They would have, yes, in a
Is
break
that a
during the
complaint
day.
from the teachers?
Okay.
Some of
They
those-
were not getting enough teaching time.
Got it. So I guess my question is just, how is that communicated out? Because I missed it. I'm trying to read all the minutes of all boards. I just completely missed any notice to the community, any meetings where we might have contributed to a conversation about that. Or was there no notice?
I don't think there was any comments.
Oh, okay.
It was simply,
That's helpful. Okay.
Reverting back to.
yeah, it was just
Got
a
it.
fix that had to take place during COVID. And
Okay.
then it wouldn't read back. There were lots of sidebar agreements, memorandums of understanding for 1 year, 2 year that took place.
Okay.
The previous schedule had some benefits, but this schedule has way more benefits for the students and the staff than the previous one.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Just as far as, I know there were some new curriculum changes at JGS level, and I know there are committees that work out at the SAU level and at the JGS level. Again, I completely missed that there was a new curriculum coming out. How did that process work, that they were chosen, and who participated, how did we, I missed that, so was that something that was shared out, and how would we learn, how could I become better informed? So that I'm not finding out later rather than before.
We did a presentation here at the board last year.
Yeah.
Kristen, who was our building rep, which I talked to you about, presented to the whole board, but that work came out of our math, SAU 9 math curriculum.
Yeah.
And that's where it came out to the teachers. I'm not sure it's been,
It gets approved at the SU 9 level.
Okay.
SAU 9 board. And
Kristen,
then we did a presentation.
Kristen did a great job with that presentation, and you went back and looked at the video from that?
No, that I saw, I just didn't know that it was going to be, how it was going to be implemented here and who was implementing it. And I just was not clear on who got trained on what and who participated in the training and things like that. So I'd just love to know that. And
We're still training, this is just phase 2. And so Kristen was fully trained last year, and now she's helping with the math coach from SAU 9. This is the second year. All of the teachers teachers are working with the math coach this year to implement it.
Okay, but we're using it.
Yes,
Okay, but, so have the teachers been trained on it besides Kristen?
over the summer they were, and they worked with Kristen all of
Okay.
last year to hear about it. And the math coach from SAU 9 was in the building as well.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
They
Thank
do
you.
a pretty thorough job, Kristen's amazing with that, and all of our teachers are on subcommittees for different academics. And so when they make changes, it's a thorough process for the better, and we do get notified of that, when it comes to when it's brought up at a school board level.
Just a crazy question, I'm sorry. So phases of, there's phase one, that was last year when they were doing the training, like a train the trainer type of thing. Phase two, they're implementing it in
Well,
the
the
schools?
math curriculum committee has been working for 2-3 years on the math competencies, and they're the ones who did the initial research on the programs that matched the instructional methods and the competencies that they wanted to implement SAU-wide. And then they presented hiring a math coach at the SAU. Is this her second year or her third?
Third now.
Yeah. So it's been phased in gradually over time, and teachers have had opportunities to read and to meet with each other and to get coached actually in the classroom, watch model lessons being taught, and then taught with the coach observing them as well. And the assessment piece, the OGAP, which I think the teachers talked about the other night, that's been 3 or 4 years that we've been using that method for formative assessment within the classroom. We still haven't replaced our NWEA or the state test for assessment, but as I think we've shown in our data over time, our math scores have been the greatest need in this SAU, so we've been really focusing on math for several years. This is just the first year all of the teachers have been expected to use it with support.
I had one more from the high school options committee, as we're calling it, is that fairly, or something?
Yes.
Have you guys talked at all or looked at all at the percentage of 6th grade Jackson graduates that have then gone on and graduated in Kennett?
We've done none of that yet. We're in the beginning stages, and we've just set up a matrix of what information we want to know. We've set up subgroups, so we're working in, here's 2 and 3. So what we're gonna do is then we're gonna start to do our deep dive. So we've just been basically getting a framework, what information do we want to know from each of these schools, so we're all on a same fair plane, but we've not delved into any specifics yet.
I think in another meeting, we were talking about looking at how our students do going forward and getting some of the data from the high school.
And not necessarily meaning how they do it, but how many actually graduated from Kennett. They graduated here in 6th grade, but also graduated from Kennett.
So like, what's the retention rate in the SAU?
Yeah, are
versus
there
yeah.
families that are paying to send their kids to private school, are there people moving out of district for one way or the other? And is that 50%, 80%? I think that'd be a handy number to know.
Certainly
When
not.
we're looking at school choice, school options.
And it was a lot of this over that too, because it's like, how many families move in specifically for the grammar school and then move out?
Yeah.
They're here
Yeah.
specifically for our grammar schools.
Right,
Yeah.
and that doesn't have to do, that would just be interesting information, it doesn't have to do with the high school options committee.
Well, yeah.
They could use the
I
information.
believe it does, because
Yeah.
it would be to put more weight or less weight on the school options, or the school options choice.
Okay.
Kevin, do you, I know you all track that, some of that retention stuff, do you actually have easy access to that from
No.
Jackson or no?
It's more complex,
Okay.
because you would have to find out the reason why they didn't finish it at Kennett High School. Did they want to move? Did they, was it a parental choice? Was there separation agreement between families
Yeah.
and move with residents? And I think it's a fair question.
Both ways, I think.
We did it years ago where we said, 90% of the students who start. Well, this is a few years ago, it's changed. That started in kindergarten, finished 6th grade here. I think that has changed in the past few years. Where other schools, it's 50%, right? In some it's 60 or 70%. So I think anecdotally you could take a look to find out what that attrition rate was, but pinpointing why, you might be able to find out some of the information. But
Okay, anybody else?
You see my dad? What are you doing?
Yes.
I think John Hamilton can. Did you stop at the store?
Do they know that?
What's that?
Oh, he can swim, he can, I think so, he can do that.
There's my dad.
See about the gas pump.
My dad can definitely start.
Thank you.